So what does it actually look like to manage a virtualized environment? So let's start off with the idea of virtualized servers. So with virtual servers, what you effectively have is a hypervisor host that has lots of copies of a virtual clone of a server. Now, as we talked about before, what makes the hypervisor work is that it creates a fake server. The application and the operating system inside think that they're running on their own. So you're basically emulating a full piece of hardware. This is convenient because the applications don't need to be rewritten to work inside of a standard server virtualization environment. And as we know, a lot of the actual management infrastructure is how do you start to move and allocate resources by moving the entire server, and the application that's embedded inside of it goes along with it. So the question is, what do we see as the next step? Well, if we understand what server virtualization is trying to solve, the one key point that isn't participating here is the application itself. So what happens if we now say, let's remove the constraints that the server itself places on the application? So what we see as the next level is really the idea of application virtualization. Now this is a way of freeing ourselves from having to take the entire virtual server with us and instead just move the actual process of the application around and start to instantiate new versions of this application. There is a requirement here though. As part of the server virtualization, you have a management scheme that's dedicated to moving these virtual servers. But each one still looks and interacts like a physical server on the network. It has its own IP and MAC address, and it's located as a specific network element. The next piece though is if you start to look at how do you virtualize the application itself, now you have to have the applications understanding where they're located and how they can start to communicate with each other. This actually requires building a whole middleware layer that the application itself is aware of, so that in this middleware layer you can spawn up lots of different copies of processing, lots of different locations for data, etc. So it actually requires that you rewrite the application to have this middleware layer that allows you to distribute the processing throughout either your data center or throughout your enterprise. This is where we see some of the larger applications starting to move. If you look at applications like Hadoop or even some of the private applications that have a very tightly vertically oriented stack, especially from some of the large search engines or OTT providers, they have the ability to actually create and manage this software middleware layer and then write applications to specifically take advantage of it. So what do we see as the real evolution here? If you have applications that are tied effectively to the hardware, you have server virtualization. However, if you have the ability to now rewrite applications to take advantage of this distributed processing, you can now start looking at individual application virtualization.